On the panel today is Robert Larocca from the REIV, Melissa Opie from Keyhole Property Investments.
Hello.
And Tim Fletcher from Fletchers. Today we're talking about buying from auction or from private sale. Tim, why would you go to auction?
Well, fundamentally, if an agent believes after around 4 weeks of marketing there will be competition for the property, then you would seriously consider auctioning it. But I think there are two criteria to auction. One, the property has to be suitable. And the other...
What's suitable?
Well, unique properties, for example. Properties that are hard to price in the first place.
Also, too, the vendor's reserve price has to be realistic. Because if you take a property to auction and they have a delusional price, it's going to be a failed campaign every single time.
Often it's the process of the price discovery. I mean, part of the point of the auction is to say, here is the property, what do you think, public, it is worth? And that will no doubt change the vendor's expectations through the campaign, because they'll see lots of people come into opens or they're not. Therefore, I might need to change, what I want. And at the moment, with the clearance rate in the mid-50s, a lot of what is happening is vendors are having to adjust their expectations and lower, what they were hoping to get for the property when they're passed in on the day, and they have to negotiate. And that's just part of the market working out the value of that property in a transparent manner, which is what auctions are good for.
Look, the clearance rate on the day is an important barometer, but I think what is often overlooked here are the number of properties that get sold either that night, the day after or the week after, and logically they can't form part of the clearance rate for that particular day. And a lot do sell within about a week after the auction.
One really interesting stat that I think that you should be aware of is that the amount of days on market it's actually taking a property to sell by auction in Melbourne is actually 51 days, which is marginally lower than that nationally at the moment, whereby nationally it's actually taking 52 days for a property to sell by auction.
So that's from start to finish?
Absolutely. Right. Also, too, I think that with an auction, you're getting a private sale mixed in it anyway.
Yeah, I do think also on this selling after, the auction to some people is deemed to have not succeeded if it doesn't sell on the day. But I do think you've got about a week flow on after the auction, so you get that run on. And I think you can attribute that to the auction itself, the auction process.
I mean, the laws are actually constructed that way. They say that if it's bought or sold 3 days either side of the physical day of the auction, then it is still under auction conditions. So the actual, the law sees it that way as well. And you talk about the point of the auction, it is making people, come to a view about that property's worth at a point in time. But it's still only about 3 out of every 10 properties, actually a bit less, is sold. Most people buy and sell at private sale in Melbourne.
Now, I think reserves are one of the most misunderstood words used in the auction process. In essence, it's a figure that the vendor is prepared to accept. It's a bottom line figure. If it's an optimistic figure and they reach it, well, so be it. They've got a very good result. But it's a bottom line figure. And I think one of the most important things here is that people shouldn't make that decision until they've actually had feedback, and make that decision based on all the feedback in the weeks leading up to the auction, and set a figure that's realistic. And often you'll see properties that sell in excess of the reserve.
A good example of that, if I may interrupt, we were chatting before we started filming today about a property that I was actually bidding at for a client at the weekend in Brunswick. And it was an auction property. It was quoted at $570,000 to $620,000. And I believe that if those vendors had have actually done a traditional private sale, they wouldn't have got the fantastic result that they secured at the weekend. The property was on the market with the first bid at $600,000. Then it was competitive. It was really full on, and they were just like hammering each other with bids, and it ended up selling for $702,000. Now that property was a highly desirable property, and it had a lot of beautiful architectural consistency, great street. It ticked all the boxes for both owner-occupiers and investors, and all comparable sales for that particular property had that hovering around $650,000 as its true value. Yet one of the great things about auctions is that when people get emotional and they get carried away by listening to a great auctioneer, sometimes they forget what they're bidding. And I really believe that that's one of the great things about auctions, is that it creates momentum and excitement on the day, and a great auctioneer is able to extract more money out of it for the vendor. And at the end of the day, as selling agents, selling agents are employed by the vendor to get the highest and best price regardless of whether or not it's by private sale or auction. But I really think that sometimes with private sale that vendors are actually getting a match and burning up some potential money that they could have actually derived from an auction campaign.
See, this word on the market, it's used by auctioneers all the time, and people who don't do this very often don't understand our terminology, so it's very important for auctioneers to communicate that to people so there's no misunderstanding. But on the market basically means that the property is going to get sold for that figure or better. And the sooner you can get it on the market, the more likely you're going to get a price that you don't expect.
If it's an area that's not in a city in Melbourne, for example, Werribee, Hoppers Crossing, Sanctuary Lakes, where they've got newer subdivisions, I think then that private sales should be strongly considered.
Yeah, I mean, there are some general rules when it comes to what homes are auctioned. They're more expensive, they tend to be in the inner city. And we released some data recently which people can download from our website and have a look at a lot of suburbs in Melbourne and how many homes are generally sold by auction in those suburbs. Somewhere like Werribee or many Cranbourne, less than 5% sales last year were by auction, whereas in the inner city and the inner east, we're talking over 60% sale by auction. So it just shows that there is a couple of basic rules in place that the market tends to follow when it comes to what's going to sell at auction and what's not.
And I'm interested how the REIV treats the statistics of those houses that don't sell at auction but sell 3 or 4 or 5 days afterwards.
We've got a methodology in place that we've had in place for 7-8 years, and consistency is really important there. So if a property sells on the day of the auction, the day it's listed, but after the hammer's fallen, that's still classed as an auction sale. If it sells the day after, on the Sunday, say the auction was a Saturday, then it is listed as sold after. Very, very few properties like that. If it sells on the Monday, we class it as a private sale. So, it's a very clear methodology there about when it's sold and what it's classified as. It enables people to look at the stats and get a feel for what's going on. Of course, there is no replacement for actually going. If you're looking to buy or sell in a suburb, going and watching a few auctions, because then you'll get some of the nuances about how that auction was conducted and what, the level of demand is there.
And if you had to sell your house, would you choose auction or private sale?
Well, the last time I sold our house, the agent recommended auction was the way to go. I found it a very nerve-wracking process, but I had a great auctioneer. I remember at a particular point where bids were going slowly, and he put a vendor's bid in for about $20,000 more than where it was. And I went, oh, gosh, what's going to happen now? And then within 5 minutes it was sold, because the auctioneer read the crowd. He knew who was there, who was interested, and he basically was saying with that vendor's bid, right, this is what the price needs to be. And the market met it, and it was sold, and it was really good.
Melissa, private sale or auction?
Auction every day of the week.
And Tim?
Well, depending on the type of property, if I've got one I expect there'll be competition, absolutely auction. I've done over 10,000 auctions, so I'm a great advocate of the auction system. But if I thought the property I had would take a long time to sell, I might seriously consider a private sale. So it's horses for courses in this business.
Thanks very much, everyone. That's all we've got time for today.